So I just wanted to say welcome to everybody and thank you for coming. And this is the second workshop of the executive skills and executive functioning for students. And I'm Kimberly Marks, and I am an LCSW, a private practice therapist here in town. And this is by no means my area of expertise, but I took some classes and workshops, actually some workshops in this particular topic, and feel like it is so relevant right now to what kids need, especially kids that are doing online virtual schooling, even the hybrid model, because I think what's happening is that parents and caregivers are really are having to provide the functions, the structure, the framework, the container that schools actually have been providing all along, but are really not able to support fully in that online model. And so parents, I think, and schools and everyone who's really supporting students, I think, could benefit to support our students in ways they can fully be able to that framework to be able to learn. So Laura, are you still?
Yeah, you kind of blanked out there for a while. Yeah.
Did I? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But it wasn't long enough. Clear? Usually if it's for a while, it's because your audio is having.
Okay. But it's good now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I am going to shift to sharing my screen. Okay, my mouse is disappearing here. Where do we go? Screen sharing has failed. I'm going to try it again.
Yeah, it's on. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Can you see it okay?
Yeah.
All right. So this workshop that we're doing tonight and the previous workshop and next week's workshop at 7 is inspired by a woman that I feel is such a great expert in this field. Her name is Dr. Peg Dawson, and I will share a resource list with you, Laura, that you can actually post on the library website. So here we go. Actually, I'm going to just type play. All right. Let me know if there's any technical problems here. All right. So what we're going to do is start the workshop by going into one of the exercises that I like to do, which helps us to bring us out of our back brains and into a place where we can really give our executive functions and our forebrain the best possible chance. So of being able to kind of think clearly. So I use what's called an I-Chi timer, and it allows me to set up it's an app called the I apostrophe QI timer, and I've set it up so that there are intervals of 5 seconds long, and we're going to hear what's called a football every 5 seconds. And so we're going to breathe in for 5 seconds, not holding the breath, but a full breath, spacing the breath in, and then being able to exhale out for 5 seconds. And so we're going to do that for 2 full minutes. What this really helps us with is to calm our physiology. It actually calms our nervous system. And when we have a calm nervous system, we're out of fight or flight. and our executive functioning is able to go at full capacity. So I'm going to start and I'm going to guide us in this. So just get comfortable. And for 2 minutes, we're going to do coherent breathing exercise. And we're going to start now. Inhale. Exhale. 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 And you can return to your regular rhythm of breathing, and that will begin our workshop on what are executive skills. So we did talk about this last week. We're going to actually go through it just as a brief recap. So the executive skills are brain-based skills. They are located in the front of the brain. We're going to look at that map again of the brain and the areas of the brain that they live in and mature in. But they are those skills that make us, those functions and skills. You'll hear executive functions and executive skills sometimes referred to interchangeably. Executive skills are what we're going to be helping to teach kids, but really it's that executive functioning, which is the capacity of the brain that helps us to really put into motion what it is that we want to achieve. And these skills don't have anything to do with our actual intelligence. And interestingly, these skills take 25 years to reach full maturity. So the very, very interesting thing about the brain, if we remember from last week, and I'm going to only say that one last time because even if I'm a little bit repetitive, I always think that it's nice to hear things more than once just because that repetition, I think, is always really important for all of us when we're learning. And that's true for kids as well. So if we look at that brain visual, the back brain is the place where we have movement, coordination, heart rate, breathing. We have those functions that keep us alive. And the brain develops from the back brain forward. So the brain doesn't actually fully develop until the age of 25. So those executive skills that you see in the very front part, the blue area in the front part of the brain on the left side of the image here, that's actually the prefrontal cortex of planning and attention and decision making and some of the other skills that we're going to talk about tonight. So in brain scans, that area of the brain actually doesn't fully light up in brain scans. It continues to light up more progressively, but doesn't fully mature until the age of 25. So what we are doing is we are asking kids to do a lot of things that they are not really fully capable of until the age of 25, and even most adults even still have some of these areas. Even as I was studying this topic, I'm thinking, oh, I absolutely really need this, or, you know, I need that. So I think that it's really helpful for all of us to really assess what our own executive functions are, such as planning or organization, and we can really fill in the blanks for ourselves on what we all need. So in developing these skills and in developing these areas of the brain, what happens is that the synapses are actually firing in the neurons in the brain, and the myelin sheath is actually developing. So that fatty sheath is developing as kids are getting older. And what helps those brain synapses to develop and to connect and to wire in is repetition. So practice, repetition, 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 and experience helps the skills to get more fully wired in. So it's important that we give kids lots and lots of opportunities to continue to practice these skills, and that's actually what we're going to dive into tonight. So I love this. It's actually our role to serve as the prefrontal lobes for our kids and our students until they are able to take in the capacity for them to function, for their own frontal lobes to function at full capacity. So we need to give them lots of opportunities as their brains develop. And the executive skills are in two different categories. So we have those foundational skills. Last week we covered response inhibition, working memory, emotional control, and flexibility. And this week we are going to cover sustained attention and task initiation. And those two are two of the foundational skills. And then we have the advanced skills, which the two of which we're going to cover tonight of the advanced skills are planning and prioritizing and organization. And then next week, we're going to get into time management, goal-directed persistence, metacognition, and stress tolerance. So the advanced skills build upon the foundational skills. So we're going to jump right into sustained attention. And the definition of sustained attention is the capacity to maintain our attention to a situation or task in spite of distractibility, fatigue, or boredom. And so that, I think, is something that we can look at. So when we see our students actually taking frequent breaks when they're working, breaks that seem like they're too long, kids can get distracted by thoughts or their moods or daydreams, or those being kind of internal distractions. Who doesn't have kind of what they call in meditation circles a monkey mind, right, where we're actually, you know, kind of thinking about what's for dinner or thinking about other things that are happening, external distractions in the room. I mean, there's a lot I noticed in my house, external distractions. I happen to be a very big distractor to my kid at home, because every time I walk by a doorway, I get a, hey, how you doing? Love you. What's going on? And so it's like, go back, go back. So I'm a big external distractor, but other external distractions could be other sounds, phones, computer, TV, games. You know, I think kids aren't necessarily in a big classroom when they're home. Right now, they're actually, like my guys, sitting in each individual room. So there's just a ton of other possibilities that they could get distracted by things that, like a phone kind of, you know, sitting right there next to them. So sustained attention is also a difficulty that we see is like when they're rushing through their work, they just want to get it done. It's not about the quality of the work. When they don't know their limits of what their limit of attention is, or when it's the best time to work. So not knowing what our limits are is and this varies person to person, right? So when I'm sitting down, I can start to gauge just what's my limit of attention when I'm actually sitting there, and I'm able to really kind of be able to, relatively focus on something before I need to take a break and give my brain a break. So kids who have processing disorders or ADHD, which is actually another category all on its own that we could talk about, but people have different capacity for attending, because let's just say even with processing disorders, for instance, it's going to take a lot more effort to actually sustain attention for longer periods of time. So there might be a necessary component of building in like more frequent breaks, or my favorite, just like getting up, stretching, moving, doing some kind of stretch, or like even just kind of like taking a little bit of like a breather or a walk. So the other piece is knowing when it's the best time to work. So for instance, like when doing homework or work that's outside of those structured online classes, when might it be the best time to work? It might not be, kind of doing extra work might not be the best at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because that happens to be a time where our bodies might actually need a little bit more of a break. Maybe a little bit later might be better. In earth-based cultures, 3 o'clock happens to be siesta time. So it might be, and our bodies actually get less oxygen at those times. So it might be better to do it, after there's like a break, or, just some downtime in the afternoon. So some strategies for sustained attention are to set realistic goals for ourselves, or for our students to set realistic goals for themselves, take planned breaks. And one of my favorites is actually trying to set up what's known as the Pomodoro method. So when you start to identify how much time you can actually sustain your attention, say it's 20 minutes, maybe even 25 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, maybe even set like a little tomato timer or kitchen timer, and just plan segments where you get your time where you're focused, and then you actually have like your 5 or 10 minute break. And so being able to actually get back, and then kind of get back on track, get back on the task is helpful. Before we start, getting all the necessary materials collected, and build in rewards, such as for completing tasks. So a reward can be any kind of enjoyable activity, or something that is kind of like a, cup of tea, fun, hot cocoa, something that is like some kind of reward that can help to, help us to sustain, help the kids to sustain, being able to be there and keep going with it. And then, the last one, which we've kind of touched on a bit, is to observe how long the attention lasts before a break is needed. And so we can use, like we used on my phone, the iChi timer, which is, you can use the iChi timer for any length of time. So you could even kind of use this meditative mindfulness technique to set a tone or a bell to go off every 5 minutes, or every 2 minutes for that matter, where we can actually train ourselves and train our minds to bring ourselves back into awareness and bring ourselves back into attention. And so kids can do this too. So when the bell goes off, it's like, oh, what am I paying attention to? Right, okay, focus, refocus, right? And so the woman that I mentioned, Dr. Peg Dawson, she actually mentions an intervention where kids have like an index card on their desk, and every time the tone goes off, they actually make a mark if they were paying attention to what they were, trying to attend to. And so it's just a way of being able to train the brain to continue to attend. So what I was thinking is that I'm going to build in as we go along today, just like I did last week, some little exercises or things that are helpful as far as energy exercises or movement exercises. And one thing that really helps, and you see this a lot with like energy medicine or brain gym, which is another educationally packaged way of being able to help kids to learn, and really supports brain hemisphere integration. So doodling figure eights. So there needs to be a crossover pattern in the brain hemispheres, and front to back, side to side. So even doodling figure eights can help. Or even you see this like with OTPT programs, like just doing big figure eights, or with little kids you can dance around the room doing figure eights. Or with smaller kids, what I've done is like, oh, you can just spray the room in figure eights with rainbows from your fingertips, or or if you have like a piece of like big piece of newsprint, you can actually draw big figure eights. So you see, kind of like that crossover pattern in OTPT programs, but it really helps to continue to have that brain hemisphere integration, which supports learning. You don't want that kind of homolateral pattern, which does happen when it's like, I don't want to take in anything more. So we can do little things to help kids and help ourselves actually to have that integration. So the figure eight pattern is really, really helpful. So our next executive skill is task initiation. So beginning something. And this was a big topic of discussion in my household tonight. So interestingly enough, I'm going to read the definition: the ability to begin projects without undue procrastination in an efficient or timely fashion. This is the last skill to reach maturation, which I found really interesting, and it's known as the weakest skill among adults. So the conversation we had here in my household was just really about task initiation. So both of my kids who are here doing full-time virtual learning were just telling me, it's like, I know exactly what to do. I just really had the hardest time getting started because my daughter, who just got her license, she's like, because I'd rather actually just go out for a drive. So she knows exactly what she needs to do, but she's just like, yeah. So she said, I just really need somebody to kind of help me to almost like keep me on track. And I thought, right, that's what we're talking about, right? So we're functioning as our students' like frontal lobes. And I would have thought, okay, so she's like a really great student. I'm just kind of thinking she's got it covered, but her grades have started to slip. But I'm like, right, okay. So, it doesn't really, it doesn't matter regarding intelligence. It really has to do with being able to kind of have that frontal lobe develop, to support the development of those frontal lobes. So this also, interestingly, task initiation has to do with procrastination, right? So what task initiation issues look like is avoiding. Sometimes also kids think that they aren't going to get it. They feel like the expectations are too high. They're not going to get it right, so they're not going to even start. They feel like they also put a lot of emphasis on being able to kind of like really, they put the expectations on themselves to get it right. I think it's really, I think kids and adults, I think all of us kind of get into these situations where we don't think that it's actually prefrontal cortex. We don't think of it as our executive functioning. We think, there must be something wrong with me. Oh my goodness, I can't do this. And we come up with lots of ways to kind of rationalize why it must be I'm having a hard time starting, right? So task initiation, not knowing how to get started, having a hard time getting back into the work, thinking or believing that something is going to take a long longer, or that it's going to take forever and I'm not going to be able to start it, believing that the performance won't meet expectations, usually our own expectations, seeing the task as boring, irrelevant, or tedious, finding other things to do instead of work, which is, again, a form of procrastination. And so some strategies that we can help our students with for task initiation are to make steps, to make tasks small and manageable, and also, you know, that can also be, we can be thinking of that as compartmentalizing, breaking these tasks, these kind of monumental things, into smaller steps, which it can also feel like it's overwhelming. So really being able to break things into steps and saying, okay, well, what's first? Or what's going to be important? We'll get into prioritizing in a little bit, but we can pick a minimum work time. Let's just say, like, you know, I'm gonna work for 15 minutes, and come up with some ways of being able to cue the work. So I'm going to begin my work every day and get into a routine every day at this time, or set an alarm on a phone, or I think, you know, even kind of becoming more routine about kind of like when work begins, but picking cues. That could be a verbal cue, it could be a time. Take the first step toward the goal. So the mindset is no perfection, because sometimes I think if we just get that traction, just if they can just get a little bit of traction, it's like, oh, right, you're just on the track now. Okay, go. And I've seen that here with my kids too. It's like my son was saying, oh, I'm actually really good at this. I actually just have to start doing it. It's like, yeah. So just starting. One of my favorites is write the times that the assignments that we're going to start the assignment. So like write it right on the paper. So this is writing like, okay, I'm gonna do this at, you know, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. So write it right on the paper. And another suggestion, which is a tool, is to write out assignments in a daily planner that actually has times. So like an appointment book actually has times, but you can download those as well. So the motivational strategy for us to kind of like reflect upon for ourselves actually is, if you can think of a time or think of something that you have in your life that you might have a hard time actually beginning, and might be an area where you have a hard time kind of thinking about task initiation, where it's hard to kind of get going with something. And I'd just like you to reflect on how it would, well, first of all, what that is for you, and how would that look if you were to actually get it done? What would that look like? And so really feel that, like, see yourself actually getting it done. And that type of visual imagery really impacts our brains in just the same way as if we are actually doing it. So presetting ourselves to be able to see ourselves getting it done, or helping our students to see themselves being successful. That imagery is proven in research to really have a great motivating and supportive quality. So I'd like you to see yourself getting that thing done, or that task, accomplishing that task that it's really hard to start, and think about putting it off and what will happen if you continue to not do it. So I have and this was a few years ago, but my oldest child, who like always kind of like amazed me, because she always kind of like was she always got things done. I'm like totally not like me, who has the harder time starting stuff. Like, how do you do it? And she's like, well, I always imagine what it would be like if I don't do it, and then I'm really motivated to do it. I'm like, oh, good one. So part of that was her suggestion, but I also think, you know, that creative imagery to really see yourself getting it done is so helpful, and it's a strategy and a technique that we can use with kids. So our next one is planning and prioritizing. And the definition for planning and prioritizing, and Laura, I might need to help me out because my definition is covered here. The ability to create a roadmap to reach a goal or to complete a task that also involves being able to make decisions about what's important to work on, and what's not important. So I love the words planning and prioritizing because as much as I may or may not be great at it, I really love planning. And I think that it is something that is so helpful. To be able to prioritize is actually a subset of planning. So prioritizing is really being able to not just plan, but the priority is to the prioritizing is to decide what's going to come first, what's the most important piece. So what these planning and prioritizing issues look like is not making a study plan, not knowing how to make a plan, not being able to construct a study plan, not being able to break down long-term projects into manageable tasks and timelines. I think really being able to concretely break out a larger, you know, project into manageable tasks, and then even mini tasks. So the third bullet, having difficulty taking notes or studying for tests because of difficulty distinguishing the importance. So the difficulty with prioritizing is that it all looks important, and that can be overwhelming when everything looks like it's just as important as everything else. You've got a whole host of things in front of you. As a kid, that just feels like, oh, it's just this looming kind of overwhelming, too overwhelming to even start. So spending too much time on less important elements because we don't really know what's supposed to come first, or really even it can't assign the value to what needs to come first. And then unrealistic planning, not really taking obstacles into account, which seems to be like almost every kid that I know. So I think that going into some strategies here, using an agenda to map out long-term assignments is something that I find is helpful, at least in where I'm able to observe things from here. And I know for myself, I really love my my paper planner. I even actually have I have several, but I just want to share with you also that I have this, and I'll also include this in the resource list for the library. But it is the Work Smart Academic Planner. Write it down, get it done. It's Peg Dawson and Richard Guar, and so she talks about all of the executive skills in quite in detail, just exactly as we're talking about them here. But she also has a lot of templates and long-term project planning form. Anyway, I really love it, and she also includes what's really fascinating to me. I don't know if you can see it here, but it's like a daily and weekly planner with a section that has tasks to be accomplished for the week, daily tasks, and then daily reminders. So very, very great way of being able to kind of take those bigger tasks and then kind of plot them out into a calendar or into an agenda. And we'll talk about that in just another moment. So moving down to the second bullet, which is ask teachers, what is the most important concept to study for a test? So what are the most important pieces? And I always think that it's great for kids just to kind of like reach back and just ask these questions. I think that sometimes kids get a little nervous about asking questions from teachers, but it's a good one. It's like, well, what are the most important pieces for me to focus on? That's a great question. So with written instructions, encourage kids to underline, outline, underline, or actually use like a highlighter and to number the action steps. And we can encourage kids by asking them, all right, so what comes first? Like even just a prompt of like a question, like, all right, so you're sitting down, what's the first step? What's the first thing you're gonna do? And then what do you think is gonna come after that? And so helping kids to really kind of like walk it through with them. What are the steps, and really helping them to concretize those steps into real clear action steps. Another strategy is kind of keep the goal in mind. So if it's like if it's a long-term project, we want to keep the goal in mind. So let's just say there is a project due, and it's due in a week and a half. So we're going to plot that on the calendar. And I like to use, and I'll get into this in just a second too. Let's just say we have like a monthly calendar, right? So a monthly calendar is a tool, or maybe even kind of a big whiteboard. They sell them with like, you can put kind of like a calendar or just even like a calendar template, a monthly calendar, plot out, okay, so here we've got 2 weeks to do this project. What are the steps that we're going to need to do to get to that? You know, what do we need to do? So maybe we're going to do the research, and then we're going to actually, you know, write the rough draft, right? And so even kind of like planning out like maybe a half hour to work on it every day, or 20 minutes even. And then, you know, plug that in every single day into kind of like the weekly calendar, but also plugging in those bigger steps onto the monthly calendar. So there's a way to be able to really concretely see what those steps look like. And I don't think kids can do this on their own. So I think that it's not necessarily like across the board, nobody can do it, or that every single person, you know, has every single of these issues. Of course they don't. And as adults, the same is true. But I think that's a great strategy. And I think that it's hard because the kids in middle school and high school kind of don't really want adults because their task is to separate, right? So they don't really want adults to kind of tell them, you know, or get involved or even kind of know what they're doing. But it's a great strategy to be able to show them, maybe even just to say, I said to my son today, I'm like, all right, you know, next big project that you have, I'd like to show you a strategy if you'd like to. And he was like, all right, I'll do it. So I think just allowing kids the opportunity, or just even offering, like, I have something that you might want to know, really great. Do you want me to just kind of show you how it works, and then you can take it and do it on your own? So, you know, just being able to honor that they are really kind of in charge of their own domain, which they are, but you know, if they're struggling, they might want some of these strategies. Checklists and to-do lists. I want to say, this is like a little disclosure of my own kind of to-do list thing, but I actually got not like an agenda, but a calendar with like a weekly, and I keep my to-do list right in there. And so I thought it was actually like a really brilliant strategy, because I'm like known to have like Post-its everywhere with like to-do lists all over the place. And so I revolutionized my life by keeping one. It's almost like my book. It's my, like, I have my weekly, it's actually a weekly calendar of to-do lists. So I just write my to-do lists and then kind of, you know, cross it off. And if I don't get to it, I'll just kind of like pull it forward. So anyway, just another strategy for adults too. And my last bullet here is to use mind maps and break out and I'll show you a mind map, what I mean by mind map in just a second, but break out the mind map into dates on a paper planner. So this is an example of a mind map. And I would like to actually say that the mind maps that I make are a little less complicated than this. I actually just use like one square in the middle and then just have like lines going out, you know, so like one major topic and then kind of like, you know, what are the pieces around that. And then you can actually like assign dates to kind of those areas around, and then take that, I hope I'm making sense, and then just plot them right into the daily calendars, the weekly calendars. So you can use mind maps. Mind maps are really, and you can look up mind map. You're going to see a lot of mind map examples. But I love mind maps because it's just another organizational tool. So using planners, just to recap, because planners are I think really my favorite. So if you're going to use the monthly planner, put those big project due dates on there, fill in the dates of the projects, the due dates of long-term assignments, anything that like meetings, like it can all go onto the monthly calendar. Then from that monthly calendar, we can look at that monthly calendar and kind of then pluck off and plot into our weekly calendar and our daily calendar, kind of those small specific action steps, what needs to be done each week, what needs to be done each day. And then you can even kind of like bring it down even more into what are my daily tasks and then what are my daily reminders. So you can then kind of like check off or out, you know, just line through it when you're done. So I think that it's just a really good way of being able to kind of keep on top of taking, well, actually everything that we're talking about tonight, from being able to kind of like task initiation, we're breaking it down into smaller steps. We are trying to kind of, you know, kind of bust through the overwhelm by making smaller action steps that are really manageable, bite-sized pieces. So here we are with a little bit of time left, and I want to share with you an exercise that is a great exercise for front and back brain integration. So if you take your hands and just rub your hands together and activate the electromagnetic charge of your hands, and then put one hand on the back part of your head, right under that occipital ridge, and then another hand right on the forebrain. And this is just really soothing. And then just take a deep breath in and a longer exhalation. So long, deep exhalations particularly calm the nervous system. And what we know about nervous systems and brain functioning is that relaxed nervous systems make for much better learning experiences and much more fluid functioning of executive skills, executive functioning. So you can just sit here and just relax and feel that. And this is also really, really nice and helpful for kids. So it can be very relaxing just to be able to kind of just give a little gentle kind of like holding of a child's head, if they'll let you. So the last one for our evening is organization. And the definition of organization is the ability to create and maintain systems that, I think it says, keep track of information or materials. So we are, I'm always trying to think of like designing kind of a better system. I love systems. Systems are things that just kind of like work together to create predictability. Repetition and predictability are what really helps to automate. So it kind of takes like, where's the calculator? I can't find a pencil. You know, if we have to start to kind of like do all of that, it takes away from being able to really focus on being able to, you know, have executive, to do the learning piece that kids need to do. So the system of creating a predictable place where materials are kept, predictability in terms of being able to keep track of what projects are coming up, what homework assignments are yet to be done, what homework assignments have been done, what has been sent in yet, what hasn't been sent in yet, what needs to be sent in yet. So this is going to look different for every kid, for every family, but just starting to kind of think about what systems that we can actually put in place, whether it's like systems that have like a to-do folder, a to send folder, a complete folder, a to file folder, like any things that as you go through kind of like, well, what's the system? And then what tools can I pull in? What organizational tools can I pull in, folders or binders, to kind of keep a system, like the system in place so that it's flowing. And the big keyword with systems is to maintain the organization. So maintenance is a key issue. We need systems that are going to keep us functioning and that are going to be able to be maintained. That's usually where the big place where we fall down in our organization is that we don't have the maintenance built in. So the organizational issues look like not using or knowing how to design an organizational system. Kids don't know where their papers went to. They can't find their notebooks. They lose things. It's under the desk. Not having a neat study area, losing electronic data. This can be, the case for older kids, forgetting where the files are stored. And the strategies for organization are to develop a system for keeping track of materials. So there's a place for everything. Use an organizer app. I have used Evernote and OneNote and Flipboard, and those are apps that they're storage apps that are free. And Flipboard particularly, I just added that one because it's a place that you can actually like have. I use it as an archival place, just for websites and news articles. So it's just a place you can actually create like a magazine and then just put flip your, if you look at it, you can actually see how it works. Evernote is great, same kind of idea. Evernote is actually an organizational app that you can create folders and keep everything in there. So the organizational strategy that I like and that I'm trying to kind of institute here in my home is to spend 5 minutes every day getting organized. And I think that it's great for all of us to kind of start the day. It's like, all right, let's take 5 minutes. What are going to be the top key 3 things that I need to do today? Like even just thinking about that question, what 3 things do I need to get done today? And what 3 things, like even if it's like asking a student, it's like, what are the top 3 things that are most important that helps them to be prioritizing, thinking about what are the most important things. It's also that way of being able to, take a look at the planners, take a look at the month, take a look at the week, or, just take a look at what's already written down. And okay, yep, this is what I'm going to do, just to orient. So develop task completion checklists, daily tasks, routines, use, and I've already talked about the folders to do, complete, send. Another strategy is to put due dates on the tops of the papers. That's also really helpful because then it's like, oh, okay, this is due here. Just another way of being able to try to keep on top of things. So as we head into the last 10 minutes of our evening, I think that not just organizational, but questions to be able to elicit the executive skills. We don't want to do it for them, but we want to help and teach them how to begin to, right, evolve their own brains. So these are just the things that we can ask, just some examples of some questions. So what strategy would they use? I mean, maybe we could teach them, right? It's like, okay, so this particular task initiation skill you're developing, this is kind of like, this is a strategy that you might use for that, right? So what strategy is needed? And what do you think might help here? And kids, if you ask kids, I think they'll say, you know, if you say, oh, you need a strategy, what do you think might help? They might actually have some ideas about what they, you know, what they think might be really helpful for them. You can ask, so how much time do you think this is really going to take? So realistically, because things generally take a little longer than we think. What do I need to do a week before this assignment is due? What do you need to do 2 days before that assignment is due? What might be helpful a day before that assignment is due? Do you want to practice that? Do you want to build in like running through that presentation? So you can ask them, well, what strategies have been helpful? What hasn't been helpful? Or even, you know, as they, you know, are on the back end of something, just kind of saying, well, what was helpful or what wasn't helpful with that? What might you do differently next time? What would help you with that to refine your process? What are the steps and what's first? So those are some debriefing questions. And we are moving from the levels of the two levels, our environmental and student level. So the levels that we're actually working with kids at are two different places. So one is more of an external, one is more of an internal. So we want to be helping them externally so that they can actually move these skills, their full capacity of these skills into themselves. So we move kind of the interventions more closely into kind of helping them to then be able to take on the baton of responsibility for themselves. So we perform as that kind of, you know, surrogate prefrontal cortex and those prefrontal lobes until they're able to really have that reliance on self-reliance to be able to kind of take it on and do it themselves. And then we kind of like back away and our container gets pretty large and then they're doing it on their own. So some of the environmental strategies or the interventions are to change the physical surroundings, modify the tasks, lessen stimulation, structure the setting, create choices or less choices, and then have explicit steps. And then at the student level, we're teaching them the skills and then we're motivating them to use the skills. So I just always want to say it's really important to remember to be fun and creative and relaxed, and we always learn better and our executive skills function better when we're relaxed and when kids have a relaxed brain. And with that, it's important to manage our own stress level as caregivers because that contributes to the whole picture, right? So we want to be able to just remember, it's like, you know, sometimes it's just like totally fine that it's not going well. It's totally fine, because the most important thing actually is that our mental health is good and we're actually like in a state of of less stress. I mean, nothing's going to happen in a stressed state. It's going to be much more challenging. So I'd like to ask you just to take a moment and use that strategy that we talked about, which is to visualize what you might want to try out this week. Pick one of these ideas or maybe something that you've kind of thought about and that has come up as we've been here together, and just kind of see it being implemented this week. See yourself kind of like, how might that work, or what might you say, even if it's just kind of making a suggestion to a student in your life. Just see, just consider that. So, and enjoy your night and your week. All right, bye now.